sold for nothing, called worthless, thrown to the scrap grinder, until a human saved her. They called it the maw because once something went in, it didn't come back out, not whole and never recognizable. This far below the regulated decks of Orbital Hub K-12, order gave way to corrosion. Lights stuttered overhead, dripping with condensation and rust. Air filtration was a joke. The smell of burnt lubricant, warm blood, and fungal coolant clung to every breath like mold on a lung. Morgan Mayer adjusted the filtration mesh over his mouth and nose. It made no difference. You couldn't mask the stink of dying things. Crowds surged around the grated edges of the processing pit. Traders, mechanics, and idle crew packed the upper rails, jeering and tossing wagers as a new lot rumbled into view. Something limp, wrapped in torn biowrap sheets, trailing a slick line of dry gel. Another defective grow bag, someone shouted. Can't even twitch. Useless. Straight to shred. The thing on the conveyor didn't move. Morgan barely looked up. His handheld bioscanner hummed as it assessed illegal gene sequences from a box of discarded lung root samples. That was his job now, cataloging biological waste. Rootless work for a rootless man. And he liked it that way. But then, a flicker, not from a scanner, from the belt. He looked and saw her. Not refuse. A woman. Her skin was a shade of dusky blue. Not the synthetic tint of vat-grown husks, but something deeper, almost opaline under the grime. Her long black hair fanned loosely across the belt's metal surface, matted with dried gel and dust. Her face, sharp-cheeked, foreign, was turned slightly, eyes half open, staring nowhere. Still, quiet, until her fingers curled. A tremor. Not dramatic, not deliberate, just involuntary. Real. The crowd erupted. She's twitching. She's not dead yet, but she screams when the first blade nicks her hip. 20 creds says she pisses herself before the end. A bottle arced through the air. It shattered across her shoulder. She flinched barely, just a twitch of muscle. But Morgan had already stopped breathing. No ID tag, no value marker. She'd been written off entirely. A waste of flesh and water. Too stubborn to follow root commands? Too empty to seed? They'd called her defective. Worthless. But she wasn't dead. His hand moved before thought caught up. He shoved past the betting line, crossed the access barrier, and slammed the red emergency cutoff. The belt jolted. The gears shrieked. A siren wailed through the chamber as the grinder's teeth, just meters ahead of her, slowed to a stop, steam hissing from between blood-rusted plates. The room turned. "What the hell?" someone yelled. A thick-necked dock officer pushed through the crowd. "Who pulled the kill line?" Morgan raised his badge. Section 9 Salvage Oversight. Bioanomaly Retrieval Protocol. That one's still alive. The officer sneered. So what? She's flagged null. No reproductive viability. No cognitive baseline. No value. You gonna argue with central lot tags? She moved, Morgan said. She twitched. She's breathing. That's not the same. Morgan stepped between them, dropping to his knees beside the figure. Her body was light, alarmingly so. Barely bones wrapped in engineered tissue. But there was warmth. Faint. Real. I'm making the claim under Clause 7.8. Inspection for suspected sentient remnants. The officer scoffed. You gonna waste your rights on her? Morgan didn't answer. He was already lifting her off the belt. She didn't resist. Just curled in slightly, like instinct knew it had been touched and wasn't sure yet if it would hurt. Her hair spilled over his sleeve. The officer took a step forward. You file a false claim, you're done, Mayor. Last warning. Morgan glanced up, then put on my record. He turned and carried her away, down the access stairs, deeper into the maw. The crowd parted reluctantly. A few laughed. Others spat. One tossed a metal washer that clinked off the wall behind him. She didn't speak, didn't cry, but her breathing hitched again, barely audible. Still present. He passed the waste sterilizers, turned left through an unused maintenance tunnel, and keyed open his private unit. Not much. Just a bunk, a heater coil, a sink with spotty pressure, and a stasis cabinet half full of preserved field samples. He laid her down on the cot. Her limbs didn't unfold. She just curled tighter. He didn't blame her. He set the heater beside her. Its fan clicked on, buzzing softly. He retrieved a fabric blanket, a real one, not synthetic mesh. It had weight. Memory. He'd pulled it from a colony wreck 4 years ago. The smell of it still reminded him of something safe. He covered her with it, carefully, slowly. Then, because silence was heavy and her body was still trembling, he spoke, not loud, not commanding, just present. "You're not trash." Still no answer. He moved to the cabinet and pulled a packet of warmed moss root broth, slid it into a dish, and placed it near her. The steam rose like hope. If she had any strength left, the scent might draw it out. He sat back and watched her, not studying, not probing, just watching. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He hadn't planned to act. Not this time. Not again. But when she flinched, when her fingers curled against that cold belt, it hadn't been pity. It had been recognition. He'd seen that kind of stillness before. Years ago. Another station. Another life. A girl with pale hair who'd trusted him to stop a system override. He hadn't made it in time. The fire suppression locked down. She was gone in minutes. But this woman, he'd reached in time. She didn't have a name. Or if she did, it had been scrubbed, erased, replaced with codes that meant nothing now. Still, as he sat there, the word came to him. Not scientific, not official. Sky. The color of her skin. The way she trembled. Still open, still moving, barely, but moving. Like the sky before a storm. Fragile. Alive. "Sky," he said quietly. "You're safe now. Where you will be." And for the first time, her eyes moved. Just slightly. But they found him. Morgan froze. No horror. No relief. Just connection. Two beings on either side of a boundary neither of them had asked for, but both had crossed anyway. And in that silence, under the flickering lights of a rotting orbital graveyard, a pair of blue eyes blinked once. Alive. Seen. And not screaming. Yet, Morgan sat with his back against the wall, the lower of the heater filling the room with a kind of mechanical heartbeat. The orange glow stretched across the floor, gently brushing the edge of the cot where she lay, motionless but no longer comatose. She was breathing, shallow, steady. Her thin chest rose under the blanket he'd draped across her. The fabric barely moved. He hadn't slept. Not yet. His body ached, every muscle tired from tension he hadn't dared release. But exhaustion could wait. She was still alive, and he didn't trust this place to let that remain true for long. She hadn't spoken. Not a sound, not a gesture, just that single flick of her gaze hours ago when she'd looked at him. And the silence she left in her wake had been louder than any scream. Morgan rose carefully and crossed the room. From a narrow cabinet, he pulled a canister of sterile wipes, warmed one between his palms, then paused beside her cot. "I'm just going to set this here," he said, quiet, his voice not meant to coax or soothe, just to exist. "It's clean." He didn't wait for permission. He placed the wipe beside her and stepped back again, taking his seat across the room. She hadn't stirred. Not yet. He watched, waited. The moments passed slowly. Time thickened, stretching like old coolant through rusted pipes. Then she moved, just her fingers trembling, stiff, but they closed around the wipe. Her grip was awkward, uncertain, like she hadn't held anything in weeks. She raised it to her face, slowly, and wiped at the streaks of dried gel and grime across her cheek. Morgan looked away to give her the illusion of privacy, though his chest felt tight with a strange mix of relief and grief. The woman was still here, still someone beneath the layers of biotech discard. And she was trying. When he looked back again, her skin was cleaner, still marked with scars and discoloration, but the true hue beneath was unmistakable. A deep, luminous blue, not unlike the sea-colored dust clouds of Cellari, Nine's upper sky. That had been the last time he'd seen real color in a living thing and known it wasn't manufactured. Her black hair clung to her jawline, long and tangled but striking, even as it framed her gaunt face. Her eyes remained shut. He moved again, retrieving a nutrient pack from a seal bin. The scent of mossroot broth rose as it warmed in the dish, earthy and oddly comforting, a recipe designed for low-resistance digestion in weakened biological systems. He placed it beside the cot without a word. Minutes passed, then more. Eventually, her eyes opened, and this time they stayed open. They didn't dart around or search for exits. They simply fixed on him, observing, assessing, not with fear, though there was wariness there, but with something else. Awareness. Morgan felt something inside him shift under her gaze. Not guilt, not pity, recognition. She blinked slowly, then lowered her eyes to the bowl. Her movements were cautious, stiff with fatigue. When she sat up, she used the wall for support, leaning her slight frame against it. The blanket slipped, revealing her collarbones, too prominent, as if her body had been in a long war with starvation and was barely clinging to truce. She reached for the bowl, hands shaking. Morgan made no move to help. She drank too fast, driven more by desperation than control. The broth caught in her throat, and she choked, coughing hard enough to double forward. He shot up instinctively, a hand raised halfway in the air, but he froze the second she recoiled. Her body tensed, eyes wide, breath shuddering. He stopped where he was. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to touch you. I promise." She didn't answer, but after a long pause, her shoulders relaxed. Slightly. He placed a water pouch beside her, still within reach, then returned to his spot on the floor. "You're dehydrated," he murmured. "That broth won't be enough. You'll feel sick if you don't drink something else." Still nothing. But she reached for the pouch and drank. Slower this time. Controlled. It was a small miracle. A long silence passed between them, broken only by the faint rattle of the heater. Then her voice. Thin, hoarse. Almost not there. "You?" Morgan looked up. "Me?" Her eyes locked onto his. "Why?" His mouth opened, but no words came. He stared at her for a moment, caught in the weight of the question. How clean it was, how blunt. Not what he was, or who, but why. "I don't know," he said eventually, honestly. "You moved. You flinched. That's not a reason," she whispered. "I know." He lowered his gaze. "But maybe it's enough." They said the failed seeders didn't think. That once the connection to the soil net failed, they entered an irreversible cognitive decline. Programmed emptiness. A mind turned inward until it dissolved. But she wasn't empty, and she had asked a question that meant more than movement. It meant memory, language, self. He looked up again. Her eyes hadn't left his. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. She didn't speak, not for several heartbeats. Then, no. He hesitated. "Then may I give you one?" Silence. Then the faintest nod. "Sky," he said. Her brows drew together slightly. "It's what we don't have up here," he explained. "No open air. No clouds. No storms. Just steel and shadow. But, I don't know. When I saw you, I thought of what we've lost. And what still matters." Sky didn't speak again, but she didn't reject the name either. Instead, she eased herself back down, resting her head on the cot. Her breathing slowed. One hand remained on the blanket, the other curled loosely around the empty broth dish, as if afraid it would be taken from her. Morgan didn't move. He sat still, every nerve in his body tuned to the rhythm of her breaths. The heater clicked softly behind him. Sky's eyelids fluttered once. Then she slept. It wasn't drugged. It wasn't enforced. It was choice. And in this place, that was everything. Morgan leaned back against the wall. His shoulders ached. His chest hurt in a strange, unfamiliar way. But his heartbeat had steadied. He didn't know what she was, or what he'd just started. But for the first time in years, he felt something alive near him. And he wouldn't walk away again. The recycled air inside Morgan's quarters was dry and too warm, humming softly through the narrow vent system as Sky slept on the cot. Her breathing had grown slower, steadier. That should have brought him comfort. It didn't. He stood by the sink, hands braced on either side, head bowed. The metal beneath his palms was cold, anchoring. His reflection in the steel panel above showed a man who hadn't shaved in 3 days, whose eyes carried a kind of quiet dread that came not from panic, but from knowing what came next. He'd seen signs of awareness in her. Real cognition. Real language. That one word, why, had sealed it. No Growbag clone, no root-bound breeder unit was supposed to ask why. They were programmed for function, not meaning. The entire Trilai-born subline had been cultivated to obey root-binding protocols, not question them, which meant someone had either built her wrong or right. He turned from the sink and crossed the room. She hadn't moved. Her body was curled beneath the blanket, one hand still resting loosely near the empty broth dish. Even now, there was something in her posture that struck him. Not like a person sleeping, but like something long deprived of rest learning what stillness felt like. Morgan knelt beside the cot. "Sky," he said gently. Her eyes opened instantly, sharp and alert. Not startled, not frightened, but ready. That kind of awareness couldn't be trained into someone. It could only survive in those who'd spent too long not knowing who might come through the door next. "I want to check your vitals," he said. "Not because I think you're broken. I just need to know if anything's failing. I'll ask before I touch you." Sky didn't speak, but after a moment, she extended her arm slowly, offering it to him. Her fingers were long and smooth, faintly webbed at the base, a trait he'd only seen in Trail-Eye Cedar's bred for high-moisture growth zones. "Thank you," he said. As a scanner passed over her wrist, he saw microfractures in the dermal layer, drying skin, likely due to long-term stasis exposure. Her hydration was low, but stabilizing. Liver function, still functional. Blood oxygenation, poor. Malnutrition indicators, extreme. She'd been wasting away in that tank for years. But none of that frightened him as much as what he didn't find. There was no neural stem sync. No active command receptor data. Nothing running in her that matched the standard obedience firmware embedded in her cast line. She hadn't just refused to obey. She'd shed the part of herself that was supposed to say yes. He sat back, meeting her eyes. "Do you remember what they called you before?" A pause. She looked at the wall for a moment. When she turned back to him, her voice was like glass, thin, fragile, but holding shape. "Series 6.7F. Soil Weaver cast. Genetically soil-linked. No bond response. Failed first cycle. Reclassified, non-viable." Morgan swallowed. "You were supposed to bond with seedbeds?" Sky nodded once. "And when you didn't, they discarded you?" "No. First they sedated me. Ran tests. Tried to stimulate reproductive protocols." Her voice grew more brittle with each word. "I was moved to a colder tank. Others came and went. I didn't." Silence followed. It wasn't empty. It had weight. Morgan didn't interrupt. He simply watched her, absorbing every detail. Her hands tightening on the blanket, the small shift in her throat as she swallowed something she didn't want to say. "They said I was a field that would never bloom," she whispered. "A rootless vine, worth less than the water I consumed." He had no words, no apology, nothing that wouldn't insult the truth of what had been done to her. So he gave her something else, his presence. "They were wrong," he said quietly. Sky didn't reply. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and turned her face toward the wall. Morgan took the hint. He rose, slow and deliberate, and moved across the room. He kept his hands busy preparing a light meal, soft protein gel with mineral supplements and rehydrated fiber roots. Her body wouldn't handle a full caloric load. Not yet. He placed it beside her cot and didn't push. The choice to eat would be hers, not his. Then the door panel beeped, soft but sharp. He tensed. The knock wasn't casual. Morgan moved to the entrance panel and tapped the ID screen. The display lit up. Security. Officer Rentau, one of the Maw's more ambitious scavenger enforcers. Dangerous. Clean uniform. No empathy. He turned slightly towards Sky. "Stay behind the partition. Don't speak." She was already gone, slipped off the cot like water, her body pressed against the storage recess. Not hiding from him, just hiding. Morgan opened the door halfway. Tal's smirk was already in place. "Heard you pulled a non-viable off the belt yesterday. Thought I'd stop by. Filed a claim." Section 9 Salvage Rights. It's all legal. Tal tilted his head, voice friendly in the way knives sometimes smiled. Sure, just figured I'd see for myself if it was worth claiming. No hard feelings if I take a look, right? Morgan didn't blink. She's not salvage. She's sentient. You so much as lean in this door, and I'll file a level 3 ethics breach. Tal's expression soured. You're serious. I've got footage. Movement, cognition, speech. This is no grow bag. You touch her, I report direct to K-12 oversight. Tal's jaw worked for a second, like he was chewing down anger. Then he stepped back with a shrug. Fine. You want to babysit defective compost, be my guest. Just don't expect it to bloom. Morgan didn't answer. The door hissed closed. He turned. Sky stood near the heater, arms tight around herself. He won't be back, Morgan said. Not yet. She didn't relax. But her voice came, soft and raw. He called me compost. I've heard worse, Morgan said. But I won't let anyone call you that again. She looked at him, really looked. Her expression unreadable. Then she stepped toward the cot again. She picked up the dish and began to eat. Not because he asked, because she chose. Not the artificial heat from the room's vent system, but the low, steady radiance from the shared space between them. A kind of human temperature, not measured in degrees, but in presence. She was still weak, still recovering, but Sky no longer shrank from the sound of his footsteps. She no longer tensed when he placed a food dish nearby. She even ate with him in the room now, seated cross-legged on the cot, hands slow but sure. Morgan didn't push conversation. He let silence settle comfortably when it wanted to. He understood that silence wasn't absence. It was a shield, sometimes a scar. That evening, after another uneventful shift logging damaged neural sense, he returned to find Sky sitting upright, blanket draped around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the flickering light panel above her. Not fearful, not zoned out, just thoughtful. He set his scanner down, sat across from her on the floor, and leaned his back against the opposite wall. Do you feel safe here? He asked quietly. She turned toward him. There was something in her expression now that hadn't been there days before, a slow-forming depth, like roots testing soil. Yes, she said. No hesitation. He nodded. Good. They sat like that for a long time, the quiet stretch between them like cloth left out in the wind, worn but clean. Then she asked, What happened to you? The question startled him, not because it was unexpected, he'd known it would come, but because of how gently she asked it. No curiosity, no suspicion, just space, offered to step into if he chose. Morgan rubbed a hand over his jaw. I used to work with living ecosystems. Terraforming advisory, mostly. Studying symbiotic networks in seed colony planets. That was before K-12. Sky watched him without interrupting. There was a project, he continued, his voice low, slow. The Selhari myconid. A fungus-based, superconscious organism. Tens of thousands of nodes, connected across kilometers of root and web. We gave it consciousness. Taught it to think. To feel. Her brows drew together. We thought we were giving it a gift, he said. Awareness. Autonomy. But it begged us to kill it less than a month later. Sky didn't move. I didn't act in time. I thought it was a processing error. Maybe a temporary neural imbalance. But it wasn't. It knew. It understood what it had become. It felt pain and panic, and it had no voice except through me. I was its translator, and I failed to listen. She tilted her head. What did you do? I shut it down, Morgan said, slower than I should have. The mic in its last request was silence. A beat passed. Then Sky spoke, softer than before. You still hear it? Yes. Her gaze lowered to the blanket in her lap. That's why you saw me. Not just movement. Not just reflex. You saw something that wanted to live. Morgan met her eyes. Yes. She hesitated, then shifted, the fabric falling slightly from her shoulder. There were faint lines beneath her skin, biofiber threads, now dormant, once used to connect her body to living seedbed circuits. Her cast, Soil Weaver, had been designed to link with terraforming infrastructure, feeding growth with hormonal signals and cellular regulators. Do you want to know what they told me when I failed the root interface? She asked. You don't have to tell me. I do. She swallowed. They said I was empty soil, a shell that couldn't take seed. I wasn't aggressive, I wasn't damaged, I was just quiet. My system didn't accept command pollen. I didn't bloom, so they stopped feeding me, told me I was better used as mulch. Morgan clenched his jaw, but said nothing. His hands remained open on his knees. There were others, she went on. Some tried to survive by obeying everything. Even after pain, others went still. Some were taken apart and wired into root farms. I just waited. They put me in a nutrient tank. That was my reward for refusal. She looked down at her fingers, turning one palm upward, tracing the seam where nutrient lines had once been inserted. No one ever asked me why I didn't connect, she said. They assumed I was broken. But I wasn't. I just didn't want to become what they wanted. She looked up, and for the first time, she reached out, not to offer, not to ask, but simply to touch. Her hand brushed his. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. Neither did she. They stayed like that for a moment, skin against skin, the faint press of her palm on the back of his hand, not as a plea, not as surrender, but as a statement that she was here, still her, still choosing. Then she pulled her hand back, but there was no retreat in it. Just breath, just presence. The lights dimmed automatically as the cycle timer triggered night phase. He stood slowly and turned toward the bunk. I can take the floor if you want a bed. Sky looked at him, brow furrowing. Why would you sleep on the floor of your own room? I don't want to make you uncomfortable. She considered that. Then, in a voice quieter than before, she said, You haven't. Morgan hesitated. Still, I'll stay close, not too close. He set a floor mat down and pulled the spare blanket over his shoulders. The hum of the heater deepened slightly as the temperature control adjusted. Minutes passed in the dark. Then Sky's voice came from the cot, soft, steady. What does sleep feel like for you? Morgan exhaled a slow breath. Used to feel like peace. Now, it's mostly memory. Echoes. She was quiet for a while. Then, tentatively, she said, You can stay nearby. The noise in this place is worse when you're alone. He smiled faintly in the dark. Yeah, it is. He adjusted the mat, angled himself closer to the cot. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the shift of her breath in the room's stillness. That night, they both slept. And for the first time, neither did so with fear in their lungs. Sleep didn't come easily, but it had come. Sky had drifted into it with the cautious trust of someone learning, moment by moment, that nothing sharp was coming. When she woke, it was to the quiet rhythm of filtered air moving through ducts and the low hum of Morgan's breath nearby. She turned slowly. He was still there, lying on the floor mat, one arm slung over his chest, the other curled near his head. The blanket had slipped down his shoulder. His face was calm in the pale morning light. Human, unarmored. Sky sat up and simply watched him for a while, studying the way his chest rose and fell. It was strange being next to someone who didn't want to take command or reprogram her. She didn't understand the feeling yet, not entirely, but no longer frightened her. When Morgan stirred, he blinked up at her, disoriented for half a second. Then his eyes focused. Morning, he rasped. Sky nodded once. You talk in your sleep. Please tell me I said something useful. You said my name. That made him pause. Oh, he said. You said it gently, like it meant something. It does. He sat up slowly, muscles stiff on the hard floor. Are you hungry? Sky hesitated. Then, yes. It wasn't just a physical need. Something in her wanted what came with the offering, acknowledgement, not orders. He moved to the supply drawer and began preparing a warm mix of soft protein and mineral broth. She didn't look away. When he handed her the bowl, their fingers touched, brief, unplanned, but neither of them pulled away. Sky accepted the food, sat on the cot, and began to eat slowly. A few bites in, she stopped. Her eyes lowered. Her voice, when it came, was low. They sold me for nothing. Morgan didn't speak, but she felt the shift in his attention. He was listening, not metaphorically, literally. 0 credits. They logged me as unresponsive biostock, free with bulk scrap transfer. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the bowl. First, the ones who built me. Then, the ones who bought the tank. No one even asked what I was. Just how long until I expired? She looked up, her eyes bright and unblinking. I wasn't effective. I was unwilling. Morgan knelt beside the cot. Not too close. You didn't let them rewire you. That's strength, not failure. They didn't see it that way. Then they were wrong. Sky watched him, searching for the lie. She didn't find one. Her voice cracked. They didn't name me. Not once. I had numbers, version codes, molecular batch tags, but never a name. You have one now, Morgan said. And you're not a transaction. You're not property. She exhaled through her nose. Then why do I still feel like I need permission to be alive? He didn't answer at first. Then he reached out, slowly, deliberately, and touched her hand. You don't, he said. Not from them. Not from me. Not anymore. Sky's breath caught. Her fingers stiffened under his, then slowly, uncertainly, curled around his. No alarms blared. No system override initiated. Only silence. And the warmth of skin that wasn't trying to own her. Their hands stayed joined longer than either of them expected. Then a knock. Morgan stood fast the moment shattered. He crossed the door and checked the panel. No ID. Sky's posture changed. Not fearful. Ready. He opened it halfway. A small figure in a grease-streaked engineering jumpsuit stood outside. Young. Pale. Eyes sharp. Morgan Mayer. Yes. I don't have long. Logistics just rerouted your claim. They're saying you filed false salvage data. She's been marked for wet use reassignment. They'll collect her by midday. Morgan's pulse spiked. Why? Corporate wants to liquidate unsold inventory with experimental neurobridging. They think she might still be useful tissue. She's not tissue. I know, the woman said. But that's not how they see it. I owed someone a favor. Now I've repaid it. She left before he could thank her. He shut the door and turned. Sky stood there. I heard. He nodded. They're coming. You should run, she said. I'm not leaving you. You don't owe me anything. He crossed the room, stopped just in front of her. I chose you. Sky's jaw trembled. Why? You don't even know me. I know enough. She stepped back, shaking her head. You saw me flinch. That's all. No, he said. I saw you refuse. They designed you to bend, and you didn't. You survived. You endured. Sky's lips parted, her eyes wide with something between disbelief and realization. She swallowed. I don't know how to want this. They never programmed desire. Just compliance. Then don't want. Just choose. She looked at him, really looked. No defenses. No calculation. Just a woman standing at the edge of something terrifyingly alive. Then she stepped forward, slow and sure, and raised a hand to his face. Her fingers brushed his cheek, traced the line of his jaw, like she was memorizing the fact of him. And then she kissed him. Not perfectly, not confidently, but honestly. Morgan didn't move at first, stunned by the depth of it. Not the act, but the intention. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. I don't want to be sold again. You won't be, he said. Not while I'm breathing. Sky nodded. Then she turned, started gathering what little she had. Nothing really, just the clothes on her back and the thin blanket he'd given her. But her movements were quick, purposeful. He watched her. You're sure? I am now. They didn't speak again as they packed. There was no time. But when she passed him at the door, her fingers brushed his arm, this time with certainty. And in that moment, Sky, sold for nothing, built for obedience, discarded and forgotten, walked forward not as someone escaping, but as someone becoming. They moved like ghosts through the maw. The vents hissed overhead. Pipes shuddered with the breath of rusting lungs. Morgan's steps were steady, but his grip on Sky's wrist was firm. Not tight, never forceful, just a tether. A promise, don't get left behind. Sky didn't speak, but she didn't resist either. That was new. The chaos they'd escaped still rang in her bones. The airlock breach, the acid spray warning, the sharp bark of command from the dock patrol. Morgan had pulled her through every shadowed corridor, dodging scanners, his back nearly breaking from shielding her body. Her breathing came in thin, shallow pulse. Not from pain. Not anymore. From memory. They ducked under a flickering sign that read, Mate. Ducked hashtag 53C. Morgan swiped his access card, and the panel stuttered, then clicked open. Inside, dark, dry, quiet. The hatch hissed shut behind them. Sky collapsed against the far wall and slid down, curling into herself, knees to chest. Her breathing slowed. Morgan crouched in front of her, his voice low. "You okay?" She nodded once, but her eyes didn't meet his. Instead, she stared at her fingers. They were glowing. Not bright, not fully lit, but faint arcs of current flickered along the ridges of her skin, like distant lightning inside a deep ocean. He noticed. She flinched. "I saw something like that once," he said soft. "Back on Varda Station. A root weaver from the Saldai fields. They said when her nervous system started sinking again, the lights came back first. I thought it was broken," she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, really looked. There was dirt on her cheeks, streaks of oil along her collarbone. Her hair was tangled, damp at the edges. But the light in her fingertips didn't come from any external tech. It was hers, alive, returning. "No," he said gently. "You were dormant. That's not the same thing." She stared at her hands like she didn't believe him. But the flicker didn't stop. Morgan sat beside her, back against the same wall. He didn't touch her. She hadn't reached for him since the kiss in the lift. She hadn't even mentioned it. But something had shifted since. The silence between them felt full now. Not empty. Her voice came small. "Why did you do it?" He glanced at her. The kiss. No, a pause. The belt. The lever. Back then, Morgan let his head fall back against the wall. A second passed. Then two. Then he said, "Because once a colony asked me to kill it." Sky turned to him. He smiled without joy. "Selhari myconid. Semi-sentient fungal superstructure. Beautiful system. I was supposed to measure neuroconductive response to harmonic feedback. See if we could build planetary communication interfaces. You made it speak. I made it scream." His eyes closed. It asked for silence. Begged. I didn't listen. Not soon enough. Sky didn't move. Morgan continued, voice a rasp. "You weren't screaming. That's what I noticed. You weren't resisting. You were just waiting to die. Like it did." The air hung still for a moment. Then Sky whispered, "I wasn't waiting. I was hiding." Morgan turned to her. Her eyes were wide, not afraid, not pleading. Honest. "I thought if I didn't move, they'd stop noticing me," she said. "If I went still enough, long enough, maybe I could rot out of their memory. But it never worked." She held up her hand again. Sparks pulsed gently under the skin. "They always remembered me, just in the wrong way." He didn't know what to say to that. But his hand inched closer. This time, she didn't flinch. She laid her palm against his. Skin to skin. Warm. Damp. Real. "Morgan," she said, testing his name like it had weight, like it had gravity. "I don't want to hide anymore." And that was it. No confession. No tears. Just her hand on his. A declaration made without volume. A few minutes later, the floor vibrated, soft, rhythmic, like distant footsteps from above. Patrols. Morgan rose, his back tense. "We need to move." She stood too, slower. The glow in her fingers dimmed, but didn't vanish. "I know a way out," she said. He blinked. "I was born in ducts. Sold in ducts. Moved through vents for years. I know which ones don't echo." He stared at her. "Sky, are you sure?" She nodded. "You saw me when I was buried. Let me see us out." And this time she took his hand. They moved in silence again, but now it was not because they feared sound. It was because they trusted each other to hear without speaking. Through the dark steel of the maintenance shafts, the faint pulse of Sky's light lit the path forward. And for the first time, Morgan didn't feel like they were escaping. He felt like they were being led home. The ship hummed like a heart ready to rest. Morgan stood at the viewport, eyes locked on the planet below, an unclaimed world rotating in gentle silence. Its surface bloomed in dusty ochres and soft green veins, wrapped in an atmosphere thin but breathable. No stations, no syndicate claims, no eyes, a place no one wanted. Perfect. Behind him, Sky moved slowly. Her bare feet pressed into the grated floor with reverent care, like she was afraid to wake something. She wore one of Morgan's old shirts, sleeves rolled up. Her hair was cleaner now, looser, glistening with moisture from a real shower. Her skin, once dulled and cracked, shimmered faintly where biofibers had reignited beneath her dermal layer. Her fingertips glowed again, softly, pulsing with a rhythm no machine had programmed. "Morgan," she said quietly, "you sure about this?" He turned. Her voice was steadier now. Still cautious, still low, but no longer afraid. Her words didn't sound borrowed. They sounded earned. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." He crossed the room and gently placed a data strip in her hand. A registry chip, unbranded. Blank. Legal. No ties. Her eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "I traded my entire personnel record for it. Burned every trace. To them, I never existed." She looked at him, something trembling beneath her calm exterior. "Then why keep me? I'm nothing." He reached out and touched her cheek. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. "You're not nothing. You're the only thing that made me feel again." Her breath hitched. "And I think," he said, stepping back, "you're about to show this place what it's been missing." They landed in silence, save for the rhythmic beat of stabilizers touching down. The hatch creaked open, revealing a dawn-colored sky. The air was dry, cool. When Sky stepped out, her boots crunched into untended soil, real soil. Not cultivated or compressed. Wild. She knelt, pressed her fingers to it, closed her eyes. Morgan watched her. Minutes passed. She didn't speak. Then, "It's listening." He walked up beside her. "To what?" "To me." She looked up, eyes glassy. "Not the old signals. Not chemical cues. Just my presence." "Sky." She interrupted by placing his hand over hers, fingers warm against his. "I feel life," she whispered. "It's not mine. Not yet. But it's close." Morgan froze. "You mean?" She nodded. "I'm not broken. They thought I was sterile because I didn't bond with their tech. But I never needed it." He sank to his knees beside her, emotions swelling in his throat. Her hands moved to her stomach. Not dramatically, not performatively. Just gently, like planting a seed. "It's small. Too early. But it's there." He exhaled. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything." They sat like that for a long time, breathing the clean air, listening to the wind that felt earned, not artificial. Her head came to rest on his shoulder, and his arms slid around her waist, tight but calm. Not from fear, from choice. Later, they began to unpack the supplies. Not weapons, not tools of survival, but saplings. Containers of lichen. Microbes Morgan had preserved since his academic days. Sky moved with purpose, hands guiding each root like it mattered. Because to her it did. She hummed as she worked. A low, wordless tune, perhaps remembered, perhaps invented. It didn't matter. The melody made the wind feel warmer. As the sun began to set, painting the hills in firelight, Sky looked up at him and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For stopping the belt. For not turning away. For not asking me to become something else." He kissed her, then, not out of desperation or hunger, but from understanding. It was the kind of kiss that sealed something ancient and new at once. A contract not signed in ink or code, but in skin and presence and soil. When they pulled away, Sky whispered, "Let's grow a world that doesn't throw anything away." Morgan nodded, a quiet smile breaking across his face. And together they began. Not with a flag, not with fire, but with roots. The planet had no name when they arrived, just a code on a forgotten chart. But now, in Morgan's logbooks and Sky's memory, it was called Thesa. It meant first soil in her ancestral tongue, or at least in the fragments of memory that came to her now and then like pollen on wind. The world had changed, or maybe it had just awakened. The moss had crept outward from their landing site in slow, eager spirals. The lichen they seeded around the lower valleys now danced with color, purples, golds, silver-veined blue. And deeper still, under the clay-rich rock, root systems whispered to one another like a network of secrets, old and curious and hungry for light. Sky walked barefoot in the morning chill, her feet dusted with soil and sunflakes. Her long dark hair was braided now, interwoven with tiny ribbons of fiber she'd grown herself. Not from vanity, but from life. the way vines climb not for beauty, but for air. At her side, a small hand clutched hers. The child, small, soft-skinned, with Morgan's quiet gaze and Sky's twilight blue complexion, stumbled over a root and giggled. He didn't speak much yet, but he listened to everything, like the soil did, like his mother had. Morgan stood nearby, repairing a solar panel that had come loose during last week's storm. His jacket was patched at the shoulders, streaked with mud and dry pollen. He liked it that way. He said it smelled like work and her. Sky watched him from a distance, watched how his hands steadied the unit, how he hummed the same melody she used to sing when tending roots. Their child began to hum it too. Later, at dusk, they all sat near the ridgeline, on the same rock where Morgan had first sketched the map of their crop cycles. They drank warm broth. The wind was gentle. A few birds, hybrids from their bioseed cache, had nested in the nearby cliffs. One sang a shrill, clumsy tune. The child imitated it, laughing. Sky leaned into Morgan's side. "You know they'd still call me defective," she said softly. He kissed her temple. "Then let them watch the world you grew." Silence. Then, Sky added, "I was never designed to be a mother." Morgan's fingers threaded between hers. "Good. Because you're becoming one." Above them, the stars blinked in unfamiliar constellations. They no longer marked the edges of routes or dominions. Here, they were just lights. And beneath those lights, two people who were once broken, who were sold, forgotten, exiled, had become something no blueprint or caste system could ever predict. A family, rooted, unyielding, and free.